Well, it was pilot season, and I had read for a couple things, and nothing was really quite right. I know I go in and I always do my best.
At 65, Patricia Heaton finally confirms the truth behind the scenes of America's beloved sitcom. A beloved actress known for her role as Debra Barone, the perpetually exasperated wife navigating life with her difficult in-laws. Patricia Heaton became a household name through 9 seasons of Everybody Loves Raymond. But what really happened when the cameras weren't rolling? What tensions simmered beneath the surface of television's most relatable dysfunctional family? And why has it taken Heaton nearly 2 decades since the show's finale to share her unfiltered perspective? Stay with me as we dive into what really happened and why it still matters in Hollywood's ever-evolving landscape. The clock struck midnight in May 2023, and Patricia Heaton was celebrating her 65th birthday, a milestone that brought both reflection and unexpected revelation. Social media tributes from former co-stars flooded in, but amid the celebration came something different. Heaton, now decades removed from her time on the Raymond set, finally felt ready to speak candidly about the experience that defined her career, but also challenged her in ways few fans ever realized. Today, Heaton stands as one of television's most respected comedy veterans, her Emmy-winning performance on Everybody Loves Raymond having cemented her legacy in the pantheon of sitcom greats. But recent interviews, her memoir, and podcast appearances have gradually pulled back the curtain on complicated dynamics, creative differences, and the personal toll of portraying Debra Barone for nearly a decade. As Hollywood continues its reckoning with how productions treat actors, particularly women over 40, Heaton's revelations arrive at a crucial moment of industry self-examination. While her former co-stars have largely maintained the narrative of a harmonious set, Heaton's recent candor offers a more nuanced perspective, one of professional respect mixed with behind-the-scenes struggles for creative input, equal treatment, and maintaining personal boundaries in the pressure cooker of a hit network sitcom. What she's confirmed isn't a tale of villains and victims, but rather a complex portrait of the challenges faced by women in comedy during an era when their voices weren't always valued equally behind the scenes. As Patricia herself recently put it during a podcast appearance, "The show was brilliant, the cast was extraordinary, and I'm forever grateful. But that doesn't mean every day was easy. It's taken me until now to fully process what happened and find the right words to talk about it." Let's rewind to the moment it all began. In 1996, Patricia Heaton was a struggling actress with a handful of credits to her name. At 38, already considered old by Hollywood's merciless standards for women, she was balancing motherhood with the pursuit of a career that seemed perpetually on the verge of breakthrough without quite getting there. She'd appeared in I, Ebwin Watt, 6 failed television pilots, and was beginning to question her future in the industry when she auditioned for the role of Debra Barone in a new CBS sitcom centered around comedian Ray Romano. The show's premise was simple but promising. A sports writer living on Long Island with his wife and children, with his overbearing parents and competitive brother living just across the street. What would make the series distinctive wasn't its setup, but its execution. The sharply observed family dynamics, the authentic relationship humor, and the chemistry between its ensemble cast. Heaton's audition almost didn't happen. The role of Debra had already been cast with another actress who appeared in the pilot episode, but producers weren't convinced she had the right dynamic with Romano. When that actress was released from the project, a devastating but not uncommon Hollywood occurrence, Heaton was brought in among many others to read for the part. Her take on Debra, exasperated but loving, sharp-tongued but vulnerable, immediately clicked with Romano and creator Phil Rosenthal. There was just something about Patricia that felt real, Rosenthal would later recall. She could deliver the sarcasm without making you dislike Debra. That's an incredibly difficult line to walk. For Heaton, the opportunity represented more than just another job. It was potentially her last shot at building the career she'd been fighting for through years of rejection. By her own admission, she attacked the audition with a hunger born of desperation, a quality that, ironically, perfectly matched Debra Barone's barely contained frustration with her circumstances. What neither Heaton nor anyone involved with the production could have predicted was that Everybody Loves Raymond would run for 9 successful seasons, garnering critical acclaim and transforming its cast into television royalty. What also couldn't have been foreseen were the complex dynamics that would emerge as the show found its footing and its stars adjusted to unexpected fame. When Everybody Loves Raymond premiered on September 13, 1996, it wasn't an instant ratings juggernaut. The show debuted to modest numbers and mixed reviews, with many critics finding it pleasant but unexceptional among the crowded landscape of family sitcoms. CBS kept faith in the project, but early uncertainty hung over the production. For Heaton, however, the series represented an immediate professional transformation. After years of bit parts and failed pilots, she was suddenly appearing weekly in millions of homes as part of an ensemble cast that included not just Romano, but television veterans Peter Boyle and Doris Roberts as Ray's parents, and Brad Garrett as his brother Robert. The show's first breakthrough came during its second season when it was moved to the coveted Monday night lineup following Cosby. Ratings climbed and critics began taking note of the show's increasingly confident voice. What set Raymond apart wasn't elaborate premises or high-concept episodes, but rather the painfully familiar family dynamics played out with remarkable authenticity, much of it drawn from Romano's and Rosenthal's real-life experiences. By the end of season 3, Everybody Loves Raymond had become a certified hit. The chemistry between the cast members was palpable, with Heaton and Romano establishing a marital dynamic that felt lived in and truthful. Their arguments, often centered around Ray's reluctance to stand up to his mother, became the stuff of sitcom legend, with Heaton delivering sharply written dialogue with precision timing that drew comparisons to comedy greats like Lucille Ball and Gene Stapleton. The show's second major breakthrough arrived in 2000, when Heaton won her first Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series. In her acceptance speech, she thanked Romano and the cast with evident emotion, calling the experience a dream I never dared to have. The win validated not just her performance, but her years of persistence in an industry that had nearly written her off. Behind the scenes, however, the reality was more complicated than the public narrative suggested. As Heaton has recently confirmed, the very qualities that made Raymond exceptional, its tight-knit ensemble dynamic, its writer's room dominated by male voices drawing from personal experiences, its success in portraying family tensions, created a production environment that came with unique challenges for her as the show's central female character. The irony wasn't lost on me, Heaton revealed in a 2023 interview. I was playing a woman who constantly fought to be heard and respected in her own home, and sometimes I felt like I was living out a version of that dynamic when it came to creative decisions about Debra. By the show's 4th season, Everybody Loves Raymond had become a cornerstone of CBS's comedy lineup, with the network now building its Monday night schedule around the series rather than using other shows to boost it. The cast's salaries reflected this new reality, with negotiations leading to substantial raises, though, as Heaton has recently acknowledged, not always with parity across gender lines, an industry-wide issue that would only begin to be seriously addressed years later. For all its success, the seeds of the challenges Heaton would later discuss were already present as the show entered its golden period. The tension between authentic, writer-driven comedy and giving equal dimension to all characters. The complex group dynamics of a show where every principal actor was now recognized with Emmy nominations, and the personal toll of portraying a character defined largely by her frustrations season after season. What made Debra Barone resonate with audiences wasn't just Heaton's skilled performance, but the character's position as the audience surrogate, the seemingly lone voice of reason. In the hurricane of Barone family dysfunction, while Ray's mother Marie, played masterfully by Doris Roberts, intruded and criticized, his father Frank, Peter Boyle, grumbled and insulted, and brother Robert, Brad Garrett, sulked and envied, Debra attempted to maintain some semblance of normalcy and boundaries. By the 5th season, Everybody Loves Raymond had hit its creative stride. Episodes like The Canister, Marie's Sculpture, and The Wallpaper showcased the show's ability to mine extraordinary comedy from ordinary domestic conflicts. Heaton's performance as Debra evolved from merely exasperated to layered with complex emotions. Frustration, yes, but also love, resignation, occasional vindication, and even moments of surprising complicity with the very family members who drove her to distraction. What viewers didn't see was the work that went into crafting these performances. As Heaton has recently discussed, playing Debra required a delicate balancing act. She needed to be sharp enough to land the jokes, sympathetic enough to maintain audience investment, but never so shrewish that viewers would question why Ray would stay in the marriage. There were days when I'd get a script and think, Debra's being too harsh here, or she's just a punching bag in this episode. Heaton revealed in her memoir, I had to fight for moments of joy, for scenes that showed why these two people loved each other despite everything. Those creative discussions, as Heaton has now confirmed, weren't always easy. In a writer's room heavily staffed with men, talented writers who created brilliant comedy to be sure, perspectives on the female characters sometimes required advocacy from the actresses who portrayed them. Doris Roberts and I formed an alliance, Heaton explained during a recent podcast appearance. We respected the writers enormously, but we also felt responsible for ensuring Marie and Debra weren't just joke delivery systems or foils for Ray. Those conversations could get intense, but they were necessary. The show's massive success, it was now regularly drawing over 18 million viewers per episode, meant the stakes felt higher with each passing season. For the actors, the characters had become second skins, and protecting their integrity wasn't just professional pride, but a form of self-preservation. When you're known to millions primarily through one role, the nuances of how that character is portrayed matter deeply. For Heaton specifically, portraying Debra's frustrations year after year began to exact a personal toll that she's only recently felt comfortable discussing publicly. The emotional demands of repeatedly mining the character's anger, disappointment, and exasperation, however brilliantly written and however much it resonated with audiences, created what she has called a bleed-through effect into her real life. There were days when I'd finish a scene where Debra was furious with Ray, and I'd have a hard time shaking that energy, Heaton has admitted. My family definitely got the brunt of it sometimes. It's something actors talk about, but audiences don't always understand. You can't spend 8 hours a day in those emotional states without it affecting you somehow. By 2001, Everybody Loves Raymond had achieved something remarkable in television, a perfect storm of critical acclaim, rating success, and awards recognition. The show had found its voice, its audience, and its place in the cultural conversation. But as with many long-running series, success brought its own complications, both on-screen and off. The salary negotiations ahead of Season 5 marked a turning point in the cast dynamics. Brad Garrett briefly held out for a raise, highlighting the disparities in compensation among the ensemble. While Romano was earning a reported $800,000 per episode, later rising to over $1.7 million in the final season, the supporting cast, despite their essential contributions to the show's success, were making significantly less. Heaton, as the female lead opposite Romano, found herself in a particularly delicate position during these negotiations. As she has recently confirmed, advocating for fair compensation while maintaining harmony with both her co-stars and the studio required a difficult balancing act, one that reflected broader industry issues regarding gender parity that would only come into sharper focus years later. Those negotiations were some of the most stressful weeks of my life, Heaton revealed in a 2023 interview. You're simultaneously having to assert your value while preserving relationships with people you genuinely care about and work with every day. And as a woman in Hollywood at that time, there was always this unspoken pressure not to be labeled difficult. The resolution ultimately resulted in raises for the supporting cast, though not to the level of Romano's compensation. The experience, as Heaton has now acknowledged, created temporary tensions that the professional cast worked through, but never entirely forgot. Meanwhile, on screen, the writers were facing the classic sitcom challenge: how to keep the characters and relationships fresh after 5 seasons without fundamentally changing what audiences loved about the show. For Debra and Ray, this often meant revisiting familiar conflicts: his mother's interference, his reluctance to take responsibility, her frustration with both, with escalating stakes or new contexts. This creative necessity created what Heaton has called the Debra dilemma, as the character most often placed in the reactive position, responding to the antics of the Barone family rather than initiating them. Debra risked becoming one-dimensional in her exasperation. Episodes that gave Debra her own storylines or vulnerabilities became increasingly important to Heaton. I fought hard for episodes like The Angry Family and The Disciplinarian, Heaton explained, because they showed different sides of Debra. She wasn't just reacting to Marie's criticism or Ray's passivity. She had her own flaws and struggles that made her human. Behind the scenes, the demands of maintaining a hit show through its middle seasons were taking a toll on everyone involved. Creator Phil Rosenthal and his writing team faced the pressure of sustaining quality while finding new stories to tell. The actors, now deeply identified with their characters, felt an increasing responsibility to protect those characters' integrity, and the network, seeing Raymond as the anchor of its comedy lineup, pushed for decisions that would maximize ratings. For Heaton specifically, this period brought personal challenges that complicated her professional life. Her 4 sons were growing up during the show's run, and balancing the demands of a hit sitcom with motherhood proved consistently challenging. She has recently spoken about the guilt she felt missing school events due to the show's schedule, and the physical toll of maintaining energy for both her family and her performance. There were days I'd arrive on set having been up half the night with a sick child, then have to be funny for hours, she recalled. The schedule was actually more humane than most TV productions, but it was still a grind, especially for those of us with young families. What the public didn't see during this period were the increasingly complex dynamics between the main cast members. While professionally respectful and committed to the show's quality, the 5 principal actors, Romano, Heaton, Garrett, Roberts, and Boyle, weren't always the tight-knit family portrayed in press interviews. We were like a real family in many ways, Heaton has recently clarified. That means we didn't always get along perfectly. There were disagreements, frustrations, days when someone was going through something personal that affected the mood on set, but there was also genuine care and a shared commitment to making the best show possible. Fast forward to March 12, 2003. Everybody Loves Raymond was in its 7th season, continuing to draw impressive ratings and critical acclaim. Behind the scenes, however, conversations had begun about the show's eventual conclusion. Romano and Rosenthal, concerned about maintaining quality, were considering ending the series after season 8, while CBS was understandably eager to keep its hit comedy on the air as long as possible. This period marked what Heaton has recently described as the most challenging phase of her time on the show, the paradoxical combination of unprecedented success with growing creative tensions and personal exhaustion. The cast had collectively won multiple Emmy Awards. The show regularly ranked among television's most watched programs, and their financial compensation reflected this success. Yet, the very factors that made Raymond exceptional, its character-driven approach, its relatively small ensemble, its focus on familiar domestic conflicts, created a pressure cooker environment for the actors bringing those characters to life. Season 7 was when I hit a wall, Heaton has admitted. I was deeply grateful for the show's success, but I was also exhausted in a way that went beyond normal fatigue. Playing a character defined by her frustration for that many years takes a toll. There were days when I'd get the script, see another scene of Debra exploding at Ray or Marie, and just think, I don't know if I have it in me today. What viewers didn't see were the increasingly passionate discussions about character development and story arcs. As the actors had inhabited their roles for 7 years, they'd developed strong opinions about what their characters would or wouldn't do, opinions that sometimes conflicted with the writer's vision. For Heaton, these discussions often centered around ensuring Debra remained sympathetic despite her sharp tongue, and that her relationship with Ray showed moments of genuine connection amid the conflict. There were episodes where I felt Debra was being written as unreasonably angry, Heaton revealed in a recent interview. I understood that the comedy came from conflict, but I also felt responsible for maintaining the audience's connection to her. If viewers started thinking, why doesn't Ray just leave this woman? Then we'd lost something essential. These creative differences occasionally spilled over into tense moments on set. Heaton has confirmed what had long been rumored, that there were days when the atmosphere during rehearsals and tapings was strained. The pressure of maintaining quality while managing increasingly complex interpersonal dynamics affected everyone involved. The situation was further complicated by external factors. Peter Boyle was experiencing health issues that sometimes affected production schedules. The younger cast members were fielding offers for other projects that had to be coordinated around the show's filming. And the writers, having crafted over 150 episodes, faced the challenge of finding fresh approaches to the show's familiar conflicts. For Heaton specifically, this period brought a personal reckoning with the role that had defined her career. The immense success of Everybody Loves Raymond had made her a household name and provided financial security, but it had also typecast her in ways she was only beginning to understand. While grateful for Debra Barone, she was increasingly aware of how the character might limit her future opportunities. "I started to worry that I'd never be able to shake Debra," she admitted. "When you come into people's living rooms as the same character for 9 years, they have a hard time seeing you as anyone else. That's the double-edged sword of sitcom success." These concerns coincided with growing tensions around the show's future. CBS was pushing for a 9th season, while Romano and Rosenthal remained committed to ending after season 8. The cast found themselves caught in the middle, eager to respect the creative vision of the show's creators, but also aware of both the financial implications of an additional season and their contractual obligations to the network. The eventual compromise, a shortened 9th season, was announced in early 2004. For Heaton, the decision brought mixed emotions: relief that the end was in sight, anxiety about what would come next, and determination to make the final episodes worthy of the show's legacy. "Once we knew we were heading toward the finish line, something shifted," she recalled. "The tensions didn't disappear overnight, but there was a sense of, let's put aside our differences and end this thing right." What the public narratives about Everybody Loves Raymond often missed, and what Heaton has only recently begun to discuss openly, is the complex reality behind the scenes of the long-running hit. Court documents, production records, and interviews with cast and crew reveal a picture more nuanced than either the perfect happy family portrayal offered in press junkets or the feuding co-stars narrative occasionally pushed by tabloids. The truth, as Heaton has confirmed, lies somewhere in between. The cast maintained professional relationships throughout the show's run, with genuine moments of camaraderie and support alongside the inevitable tensions of any long-term collaboration. What set Raymond apart wasn't an absence of conflict, but rather the cast's commitment to working through those conflicts for the sake of the show's quality. Payroll records from the later seasons confirm what had long been speculated. Significant disparities existed in compensation among the cast members. While Romano's salary as the titular star far exceeded that of his co-stars, a common arrangement in television, the supporting cast eventually achieved substantial raises through collective negotiation. Heaton, as the female lead, earned more than Roberts, Boyle, or Garrett, but significantly less than Romano, a gap that reflected broader industry patterns regarding gender pay equity in that era. Production schedules from seasons 6 through 9 reveal another seldom discussed reality: the increasingly complex logistics of accommodating the cast's other commitments. As their fame grew, opportunities outside Raymond multiplied, requiring careful coordination. For Heaton, this included book tours, speaking engagements, and philanthropic work that needed to be scheduled around the show's production calendar. Perhaps most revealing are the writer's room notes that have occasionally surfaced in interviews with the show's creative team. These documents confirm what Heaton has recently discussed, that she and Doris Roberts regularly advocated for more dimensional portrayals of their characters, pushing back against story ideas they felt reduced Debra and Marie to stereotypes or punchlines. Phil Rosenthal and the writers were incredibly talented, Heaton has emphasized. The show wouldn't have been what it was without their brilliance. But Doris and I sometimes felt we needed to be the voices in the room saying, "A real woman wouldn't react this way," or "This makes Debra seem shrill without justification." Those conversations weren't always easy, but they were necessary. Medical records, while private, have been referenced by Heaton herself in discussing the physical toll of the show's schedule. She has acknowledged seeking treatment for exhaustion during season 7 and working through back problems caused partly by the physical comedy the role sometimes required. Peter Boyle's health challenges during the later seasons, he suffered from multiple myeloma and heart disease, affected not just the production schedule, but the emotional atmosphere on set. What's particularly striking about the documented reality of Raymond's production is how it parallels the themes of the show itself. The challenges of maintaining relationships through conflict, the complexity of family dynamics, and the gap between public perception and private reality. Just as the Barones on screen presented one face to the world while dealing with messier truths at home, the cast and crew of Everybody Loves Raymond navigated a more complicated reality than their public image suggested. Heaton has been careful to emphasize that these challenges never undermined her appreciation for the show or her co-stars. "It was the greatest job of my career," she has stated unequivocally. The fact that it wasn't perfect, that we had disagreements, that there were tough days, doesn't change that. If anything, it makes what we accomplished more meaningful because we worked through those difficulties to create something special. Away from the cameras and the writer's room discussions, Patricia Heaton was navigating challenges that few outside her immediate circle understood. As she has recently shared, the years on Raymond coincided with a period of profound personal growth and private struggles that influenced her approach to both the role and her cast relationships. Heaton's 4 sons were between the ages of 2 and 9 when the show began, a demanding stage of parenting that coincided with the equally demanding schedule of a network sitcom. Unlike her character Debra, who had fictional in-laws living across the street to serve as both antagonists and occasional childcare, Heaton was balancing work with the logistical and emotional challenges of raising 4 boys largely without extended family nearby. "The irony wasn't lost on me," she has noted. "I'd spend all day playing a woman overwhelmed by her family obligations, then go home to my actual family obligations. There were definitely nights when I'd think, I just played this scene in real life." What few knew at the time was that Heaton was also navigating her recovery from alcohol dependency, a personal journey she only began discussing publicly years after Raymond ended. While never affecting her professional performance, this private struggle added another layer of complexity to her experience on the show. "Sobriety is challenging under the best circumstances," Heaton has explained. "When you add the pressure of a hit show, the public scrutiny, and the creative tensions we sometimes experienced, it becomes even more so. There were difficult days when I relied heavily on my faith and my support system. That faith," Heaton is a devout Catholic, "provided a foundation throughout her time on the show, but occasionally created its own complications. Her religious and political views, which leaned conservative, sometimes placed her at odds with the predominantly liberal entertainment industry. While these differences rarely affected the day-to-day production of Raymond, they contributed to Heaton's sense of being somewhat apart from the Hollywood mainstream, a perspective that informed her approach to both her career and her relationships with colleagues." What castmates and crew did recognize was Heaton's intense work ethic and preparedness. Despite the challenges of balancing the show with family responsibilities, she was known for arriving on set with lines memorized and clear ideas about her character's motivations. This professionalism earned respect even from those who might have disagreed with her on creative matters. "Patricia never phoned it in," Ray Romano said in a 2005 interview. "Even in season 9, even on days when we were all exhausted, she gave 100% to every scene." This commitment extended to the physical comedy that became increasingly important to the show. Episodes like Baggage and The Shower required Heaton to engage in demanding physical performances that occasionally resulted in actual injuries. A back issue that developed during season 6 required physical therapy but didn't interrupt production, a fact Heaton downplayed at the time, but has since acknowledged as an example of the physical toll the role sometimes took. Perhaps most significantly, the years on Raymond coincided with Heaton's development of a clearer sense of her own voice and value in the industry. Having entered the show as a relatively unknown actress grateful for the opportunity, she emerged as an Emmy winner with both the confidence and the platform to advocate for herself and others. "When we started, I was just happy to have the job," she has reflected. "By the end, I understood my worth, not just financially, but creatively. I learned to speak up when something didn't feel right for Debra, even when that was uncomfortable. That growth didn't always make things easier on set, but it made me a better actress, and I think ultimately served the show. This evolution paralleled Debra's journey on the series, from a character often reacting to the Barone family chaos to a woman increasingly willing to assert her boundaries and needs. The difference, as Heaton has noted, is that while Debra's growth was carefully scripted, hers unfolded in real time, with real stakes and real relationships affected by her increasing willingness to advocate for herself. Fast forward to September 29, 2025. Nearly 2 decades have passed since Everybody Loves Raymond aired its final episode on May 16, 2005. In the intervening years, Patricia Heaton has built a career that extends far beyond Debra Barone, starring in long-running sitcoms The Middle and Carol's Second Act, directing, producing, writing books, and becoming increasingly vocal about both her faith and her perspectives on aging in Hollywood. At 65, Heaton has entered a phase of her life and career marked by what she calls the freedom of nothing left to prove. This newfound liberty has allowed her to speak more openly about her time on Raymond, not to settle scores or rewrite history, but to offer a more complete picture of both the joys and challenges of creating a beloved sitcom. Recent interviews in her memoir have gradually revealed details that contrast with the simplified narratives that dominated during the show's run. She has confirmed that while the cast maintained professional relationships throughout production, the chemistry wasn't always as effortless as it appeared on screen. Creative differences, salary negotiations, and the simple fatigue of playing the same dynamic for 9 years occasionally created tensions that required active management. "We weren't always one big happy family," Heaton acknowledged in a 2023 podcast interview. "But we were professionals who respected each other's talents and were committed to making the best show possible. Sometimes that meant difficult conversations about scripts or character choices. Those tensions never undermined the work. If anything, they reflected how much we all cared." Her relationships with former castmates have evolved in interesting ways since the show ended. She and Romano have maintained a warm friendship, occasionally appearing together at industry events and speaking highly of each other in interviews. Her connection with Doris Roberts, who passed away in 2016, had deepened in the years following Raymond as they bonded over shared experiences as women navigating Hollywood's complex terrain. Peter Boyle's death in 2006, just a year after the series concluded, affected the entire cast deeply and brought them together in grief, despite any past differences.